Paperwork.
Is somebody calling me?
Yeah, Joan.
Oh, okay.
The paperwork said 11:15, Michael.
Does it? I thought it said
I
11.
think that might be for the speaker. I think 11:15 is the speaker,
Yeah,
the official speaker, Charlie.
yeah. I think
Well-
11 is when the meeting starts.
Well, when we had our board meeting, it was supposed to be a different time. You started early
No, I didn't. I started at 9:15 on the dot.
and I was there.
Yeah. So, well, be that as it may. So
Okay.
just to let everybody know, Dick Wilkin is out of town, the president of REA, and I was asked to pitch hit for him today. And again, my name's Mike Bresnahan, and I'm the vice president of advocacy, and I've been doing it for a while. And I see most everybody I recognize. So hello, everyone, and I hope all is well. The minutes of our March meeting that Brad Jacobson does such a good job are included on our monthly newsletter and are posted on our website. If you have a desire of looking at them, I would encourage that. Brad does a great job, so please feel free to look at those. The treasurer's report is available. We do have a new treasurer's. Abby is, I don't see Abby with us. As you know, as you may know, Karen Butler has decided that she would like to have other challenges in her life and has moved on. We did get Abby to replace it, and she seems to be doing a very fine job. So you can email if you'd like to copy of the latest treasurer's report. That we reviewed the board reviewed it earlier this morning and unanimously approved it. So if you're interested in finding it, you can get it through her. Yeah, I would say the other thing I would like to announce on behalf of the board is to thank the membership for our last meeting. As you probably know, there was a dues increase that was unanimously approved. And on behalf of the board, we'd like to thank everybody for the confidence that you have in us. And again, thank you very much. With that, I'd like to introduce, for those of you that don't know her, although I think everybody does, Ms. Cynthia Queen is going to tell us a bit about things that are going on in SD Serves. So please, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Mike. And I think most of you know here, but I do want to recap that SD Serves partners with our retiree associations to make sure that we actually know what's going on and get good feedback. And that is really appreciated. And so I want to thank Mike not only for stepping in to lead the meeting today, but for all the work that he has done working with us on keeping you all informed. And there's a number here on the phones who have really played a leadership role with that. So thank you all very much for that. What I wanted to share today is something that we talked about at our staff meeting this morning. Today, we had our annual official training for the entire staff on what we call a business continuity plan. And that means when there's some kind of a disaster or some kind of goofiness or, a pandemic, how does SD Serves make sure far in advance that we're going to get every one of you paid? Because that's our number one job, is to pay the retirees. So for many years now, we have had this practice. And so I want to show you my cool old-fashioned binder here. I have such a hard time making it go the right direction. But this is filled with paper. And I say that because I know we all know what paper is, but in this modern world, a whole bunch of stuff is done electronically. And most certainly, y'all getting paid is done electronically. It is not done, obviously by an individual written check by people in our office. It's an automated process that has its quality control and all kinds of assurances to make sure it gets done under a number of situations. And so I've announced this in the past, but I wanted to remind you all that every 2 years we run a complete disaster plan, and we actually pay all the retirees from our remote places just to test ourselves and make sure that it works. And you get paid the exact same amount, and it all works perfectly. And so I just want to remind you of that, because the pandemic really was a good example. Happened in March of 2020, and it happened just about before the monthly payroll ran. And I think the pandemic was a perfect example because our houses were still standing. It wasn't like an earthquake when we were just trying to find water. Although I know y'all were trying to find toilet paper. I do remember that. But, you know, it was a thing where we're all alive. We're just stuck inside we were stuck inside of our houses. A whole bunch of police officers and, you know, healthcare workers were out there working. But seriously, getting paid, it was something that needed to be attended to. And it's crazy that how the timing happened, because it literally was right before the payroll run. But luckily, all of our preparation had paid off. And so that time we really did have to do it. Just a coincidence that it was in March, because times we'd practiced before it had been in March. And so we got everybody paid. And so we do it and then we say, okay, thank goodness that worked. And we don't just pat ourselves on our back. We go back and go, okay, what would have made that go more smoothly? Maybe less stressful for us, because anytime you're having something like that, you're really concerned about it. So I just wanted to remind you all of that. And so there's, I don't know, probably half our staff is required to actually keep this binder at home. I'm at work, so this is my binder number 1. My binder number 2 is in my bedroom, because my home office has a bed, not a couch, and a tiny little desk. But I keep it right there, because if it all goes down again, I have to crawl over there and pull out my binder and figure out what's happening and make sure it works. Because if you think about it, what if we had no access to almost anything, you know, and so we're trying to make things happen. So I just wanted to share that with you, that always going to get you paid and always doing our very best to do that. And I thank you all for the support of those core things that we do. So that was cool for today. And I'd like to give a shout out to someone on our staff that you might not know of. Her name is Michelle Wegner-Malecki, and she is our Information Technology Applications Manager. And she's just a person who does a lot of things around here, and she gave the presentation. So it's just wonderful to see all the different layers of leadership that we have here and people making sure that everything happens.
Great.
So promise to pay you. One more thing, I am not done yet, Mike. And thank you so much, because I have very important information. Mike and I have been friends for a long time. Is I wanted to give a shout out to Charlie Hogquist, who's getting ready to speak to us today about all fun things that Charlie does. And I know you all know that we say that our board members work for free. And we appreciate that, but it really comes with a lot of responsibility. They have to read an electronic file that, if it were on paper, it'd be this thick. And they have to read all those reports before the meeting, come prepared with any questions, make sure they have no conflicts of interest. And Charlie leads our disability committee, and that, you know, long ago, the disability process was not as efficient as it is nowadays. A lot of work really went into that, and that's because of people watching the process and helping it. And so I love it every board meeting when Charlie gives great compliments to the person who leads our disability program, Sandra Clausen, because that is well deserved. And then the last thing that you may know or not know that Charlie does is he really talks to individuals and keeps an eye on people and takes care of folks. Right. So either I or our CEO, Greg Rodemaker, will get a call from Charlie with any kind of concern, issue, question, always passed on and always responded to. So just want to give him a shout out. He's not just incredibly entertaining and the best Old Town trolley or seal tour driver around. He really works hard for us all. And so I thank you all for all of your advocacy. It's lovely to be here with you every time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Cynthia? I do have a question, Cynthia. And I know that you're still, a lot of your staff is still working from home, I believe. Is there, do you see any point in time when is there something in the future where you might go back to working in the office, and how is that going, please?
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. And I did anticipate that question. So our office is still closed to the public. But we are discussing what our reopening plan will be, which I think is a state that, you know, some of the sort of intermediate type businesses are in. You've got your Googles and your other folks who are never going to go back to the office, and we'll see what they do with our buildings. But we are making the plans to do that. We are thankful that we've continued to serve everybody. We certainly have not only retirees, but actively working members who do not necessarily have a computer or email or anything. And so we've really made every effort. This morning gave out a few awards to staff for some of the work they did with our folks that have really special needs. I will be the first person that lets you guys know that. Well, me or Greg, to let you know when that's coming along. And we're really making an effort to have a very specific communication plan, because, you know, sometimes you go somewhere and it's not open and you're wondering what's going on when you drove down there. So just wanting to make sure that that's all clear to everybody, and appreciate that question and appreciate working with you all.
Okay, great. Great.
Mike, I have a question for Cynthia.
Please.
Hi, Cynthia. It's Alan Watkins. So
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. On the continuity plan, it's a paper document. And I remember years ago, I think the first time I heard about you guys paying from another site in Texas or Florida or something like that. What happens if that site's down? Is there a secondary and a tertiary site?
Yeah. Thank you. So I don't know if any of you worked with Alan. Did you ever work in the water department? Where did I sort of knew you from long ago,
Wastewater.
but Alan is
Metro
definitely
wastewater.
Wastewater. Thank you. So back when we were either married or not married to wastewater
Yeah, not
and
married
water.
at the time.
But anyway, Alan and I are still not married. But Alan has been a really good watchdog and asked some really good questions and even submitted questions, to SD SIRS about our technology. So I appreciate that. And I actually laughed when I saw you on there. So what it is there's a backup plan and a backup plan. And the very last backup plan is we pay you exactly what we paid you the month before. And that can be done with almost no infrastructure whatsoever, and which is also what the city has. Now, I know you could still find some holes in there, Alan, and that's why I like having you out there. But that is what we do, and we have an audit of it, and we keep poking holes in it and just keep trying to find every layer of every layer. So I thank you for watching.
Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to adjourn the business portion of the meeting and introduce our speaker, which we've had a number of times and has always been fascinating. Charles Hogquist started working with the San Diego Police Department in 1978, although yes, 1978, and retired as a lieutenant in 2006. After leaving the city, he worked at a number of different jobs. He was interim police chief at Palomar College, and he currently works as a tour guide at the Old Town Trolley. One of many claims to fame that Charlie has is that in 1989, I believe, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, he was in charge of the security and safety for both the Super Bowl and the World Series, which I still think, Charlie, you're the only person that's done both of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Back in 1998.
That's what I hope I said 1998. I'm sure I didn't see 1898. I'm pretty sure I didn't say that. Perhaps most importantly for everybody here, Charlie is, as you've already mentioned, as Cynthia's already mentioned, is currently the retiree representative on the SD SIRS board, and he does a very fine job for us. So he loves exploring about San Diego. He's spoken to us, I believe this is this third time, and today he's going to speak to us about John D. Spreckels, a name that we probably all are familiar with. So with that, I will give you Charlie.
Good morning, everybody. The policeman in me loves to always see stuff and ask why. And it's kind of interesting because we should all know the name Spreckels because everybody has been to Balboa Park and seen the Oregon Pavilion or the Spreckels Theater downtown. But a lot of people just take all that for granted. So first I want to tell you a little bit about Spreckels' history, because believe it or not, he is not a native to San Diego. He got drafted to come to San Diego, and I'll tell that story in a minute. Now, Spreckels' father was a German immigrant who settled in South Carolina and literally was a shopkeeper, opened up his own grocery store. And John Spreckels was born in South Carolina in 1853. Family moved to New York and then San Francisco. And his dad was one of these no-frills German guys. John and his brother Adolf literally were growing up that everything, he had to work for everything. And his father kept buying grocery stores and upgrading. In San Francisco, he's running a grocery store on Pine Street. And some of you know that's right in the heart of San Francisco. He realizes that one of the #1 commodities is sugar, because he actually opened up one of the first craft breweries in the United States in San Francisco. But Americans didn't drink beer as much as Europeans did, but they loved their sugar. So John's father found out that sugar cane was coming from Hawaii into San Francisco and then shipped by train to New York, processed in New York, and then sent back to California for sale. So he figured he could make a lot of money. So he started opening up sugar plantation, I should say refineries. and then went to Hawaii and bought land for plantations. And his dad, Klaus, actually was called the Sugar King. John eventually earned the title the Sugar Prince. And that's because he was trained at age 14. Imagine being 14 years old, okay? And this is in 1867, and you get shipped off to Germany by yourself to go to university at the age of 14. So he spent 4 years in Germany studying engineering. When he graduates school, comes back to the United States, goes to San Francisco, and his father doesn't give him a job as an engineer, doesn't give him a job as an executive. His father makes him work on every level of the sugar factories in San Francisco. And he learned the trade from the bottom up. But it's kind of interesting because he applied his engineering skills to keep improving the businesses. As a matter of fact, if any of you ever use a sugar cube to put in coffee, thank the Spreckels family. They're the ones who figured out to make sugar cubes because it was easier to transport and to use. And those are the kind of things he did. At age 22, Dad says, I got a mission for you. You're going to Hawaii. So he goes to Hawaii for the next number of years. And in Hawaii, he sets up sugar refinery plants and plantations. And that Spreckels' legacy of being the sugar king and the sugar prince in Hawaii is still there today. Even though they don't refine a lot of sugar in Hawaii anymore, if you ever go to the North Shore of Maui, especially to watch the surfing contest at Jaws, there's a little town there. And that town's name is Spreckelsville. And that was the headquarters of their sugar operation in Hawaii. But what's really cool about that little town, and this is a little known fact that people didn't realize, John's the engineer. They needed electricity and water to refine the sugar. It was the first city to have electric lights before New York, before the White House, before the Hotel Del. And he did all of that. Eventually came back to the United States and started working for his dad. But in all these journeys he took, he suddenly fell in love with the sea. So he ended up opening up a shipping company. And they used to ship sugar, people, and cargo between California, Hawaii, and Australia. And he loved the sea. Whenever he was having his bad day, he would take a trip on his yacht. And that's what brought him to San Diego in 1887. In 1887, he comes to San Diego, anchors in San Diego Bay, had never been here before, but knew a little bit about the town. And now what had been going on is a lot of people don't realize in the mid 1880s in San Diego, we were in the middle of a deep depression. There had been all sorts of land speculation. Land was going up. Babcock and Story bought Coronado and started building the Hotel Del, and everything was booming. And it was booming for one reason. The Santa Fe Railroad said that they were going to build a route that came from Yuma, Arizona to San Diego. So we would have a direct line from San Diego to the East Coast, Intercontinental Railroad. Well, Santa Fe decided that the railroad was only going as far as LA and there wasn't going to be a spur to San Diego. So now San Diego is in the middle of this deep depression. Spreckels pulls into town in his yacht, and lo and behold, the city fathers invite him to dinner. And they ask him to start investing in San Diego. Well, like I said, he's one of those people that was practical, hands-on, and did all sorts of things like that. He listened to what everybody had to say, and he said, this would be a good place to invest. So where did he start? He bought the then half-built Hotel Del, and then he ended up buying the rest of Coronado. He bought all this land downtown. He bought land in Mission Hills. He bought land which is now Mission Beach and Pacific Beach. Kind of an interesting thing because in the early 1880s, the biggest land sales in San Diego were actually in Pacific Beach because they were developing it into lemon orchards because they figured with the railroad, we had a place to ship. So all of that went bust, and Spreckels came in and he became pretty much the White Knight. And he started building everything. And it's really interesting. In 1893, the San Diego County tax assessor determined that he owned 10% of all the taxable land in San Diego County. That's how much land he owned. But he also had a philosophy. And because of his love of shipping and everything else, and his philosophy was this, he said, transportation determines the flow of population. So he wanted to start building San Diego. And that's where today we have all of these little vestiges that Spreckels left behind as part of his transportation system. We had one of the first electric light rail trolley systems in the country. And that was because Spreckels was downtown and watched people going by on horses and buggies and watched the mess that they made. He says, you know, we could do something better. So the light rail system was built. But to get people to take it, they had to have a place to go. So he owned all this land up in Mission Hills. He created a destination. It was called the Mission Cliffs Garden. And it's all the way where Park Boulevard ends at Adams Avenue. Some of you, if you go up there, they now call it Trolley Barn Park. Well, imagine a 5-acre botanical garden overlooking the bay, the valley, the ocean, and everything. They had ostriches, all sorts of plants and everything. And it was the end of the trolley line. And the trolley line ran up Park Boulevard from downtown, and it connected what was then called San Diego Normal School, now San Diego High School, all the way to the trolley barn. So he built a destination, and it was a success. Now, he wanted to play on San Diego history. And some of you may have heard of, I just forgot her name, let me find it here. A lady, and well, her name's not important, but she wrote a book called Ramona. The town of Ramona here in San Diego County is named after this book. Ramona is this tale of a Native American maiden who ended up marrying a local guy and all the problems. And in history, they say this was the Uncle Tom's Cabin for Native Americans. That's how famous the book was. Well, in the book, there's a scene about her lavish wedding, and everybody read the book and used to fantasize about this wedding. Well, Spreckels read the book, and he said, I can incorporate this onto one of my trolley lines. So he goes up to what's now Old Town San Diego, and there's this hacienda, the Casa de Estudio, which has fallen apart. He buys it, hires historians, architects, and archaeologists, and they restore the building. Now he changes the name. This is Ramona's wedding venue. So now it's the #1 tourist attraction in town, and everybody's taking the trolley from downtown San Diego to Old Town, right up what's now San Diego Avenue, to go to this venue because he created a destination for his trolley. And that's how he would develop things. And one of the things that people don't realize is in 1915, when they did the Panama Exposition and built Balboa Park, he funded a lot of that. But aside from that, nobody knew if it was going to be a success and attract people. But Spreckels told everybody it is going to be a success. And they said, why? He says, because people go from downtown San Diego to my Mission Cliffs Garden. Imagine a park that's even bigger and better. And that's what proved the success of the park. And that was one of the driving forces of the trolley coming up Park Boulevard and making the stop for the 1915 Panama Expo. Now, all of this stuff is going on. Spreckels is still living in San Francisco. He has no desire to live in San Diego because his first love were the Hawaiian Islands. San Francisco was his office. And then that nasty 1906 earthquake occurs. Literally, he's there with his wife, his kids, everything is devastated. And his wife convinces him, because one of the things that people don't realize about Spreckels, he had a lot of social unease. In his life, he did 2 public speeches, and that's about it. And because he was afraid to talk to people in person, I should say in public settings, he would talk to people personally, but he wouldn't give a speech. So his wife said, you know, it's dangerous here in San Francisco. We got the kids to look after. Let's move someplace else. He goes, I know this other island. I actually own this other island. It's called Coronado. So he moves the whole family to Coronado. But remember I said he loves the ocean. So he has to have a house, but he ends up building 2 because he liked watching the sunset over the ocean and the sunrise over the bay. So right now, his 2 houses that he built, or the 2 Spreckels mansions, still exist. There's that beautiful brick structure that's on oceanfront right there in Coronado, the one that's been in the news because of the tragic death that occurred there and the fact that they just put it on the market for sale again at like $40 million. And the other one is on Glorieta Bay, which is now converted to the Glorieta Bay Inn. So he liked both places. And it's kind of an interesting thing. So he lived between those places. But he also brought another lesson. Remember, I told you he was a trained engineer. San Francisco was wiped out because most of the structures were masonry structures. Everything he owned and everything he built in San Diego after he moved here, after the San Francisco earthquake, was made with reinforced concrete. And if you go downtown San Diego and walk along Broadway, one of the reasons the Spreckels Theater is still there, one of the reasons the SDG&E power station at Broadway and Kettner is still there, one reason the National Bank building is still there, why the Golden West Hotel building is there, they were all made with so much reinforced concrete. When they were doing downtown redevelopment, the engineers told the city folks that you need the dynamite to implode the Golden West Hotel would wipe out 6 square blocks of downtown. So they refurbished the building. So everything he started to build in downtown is made with reinforced concrete. Now we've fixed the Spreckels building, we've fixed the theater. We still use the Golden West as a hotel for single resident occupancies. But if you ever go down to Broadway and Kettner, go to the old SDG&E building. There's a little sign there that says it was built in 1911. They built a condo complex. But because they couldn't take the building down, what did they do? They took the backyard and the roof off, and that's where they built the condo complex. So if you're driving by, it looks like the condo comes right out of the building, as it was one structure. But again, that was he was determined that nothing he ever built after the earthquake would ever fall down again. And back then, you know, early 1900s, San Diego was finally starting to develop. Ulysses S. Grant's son built the Grant Hotel, which was for fancy people. Well, Spreckels built a hotel right down the block on Broadway, which mirrors the Grant. But he also realized that I'm building a railroad, because since the Santa Fe Railroad won't come to San Diego, and they'll only build a spur from Los Angeles to San Diego if we set up a coal station for stuff, I'm going to build a railroad. And if you go to the Model Railroad Museum, you know, they show you that model of the Carrizo Gorge Bridge and stuff. That was what was called the Impossible Railroad. And literally to build that, it took about 12, 13 years. And Spreckels actually had to negotiate with Mexico because 2 miles of that trip go through Mexico. But it was important to build that because people didn't realize that the Intercontinental Railroad that came from Chicago to Southern California went through Yuma. So the whole purpose behind building that railroad from San Diego, what they call the San Diego Arizona Railroad, went from here to Yuma. Because once you got products from San Diego to Yuma, from Yuma, you could send it all the way to the East Coast. And it was intercontinental, and it was revolutionary. And for Spreckels, it was great for him because remember, he's in the shipping business. Now he's got a coaling station in San Diego. So all his ships come into San Diego, they can load the stuff on the train, send it through Yuma and get it to the East Coast. And again, he was a visionary. He always planned the second step of all of these things he did. And, but one of the things that everybody always sees about Spreckels, the most common thing, is the Spreckels Organ Pavilion in Balboa Park. What people don't realize is Spreckels, when he was getting his education in Europe, even though it was considered frivolous by his father, he became a master at playing the organ. He actually played the organ in the park. But in his home in Glorieta Bay, he had this really beautiful organ installed. And the people in Coronado, the newspaper used to report that on Sunday mornings, you would hear him playing the organ because the sound went all through Coronado and even across the bay. Kind of interesting because the organ has been repaired and lost and nobody knew where it was. And about 3 years ago, they discovered it at the Whitney Museum back east. So that organ is still there that he played. Now, the Organ Pavilion in Balboa Park, he built it as part of the exposition, actually funded money that for a number of years paid for an organist to play the music. And it's kind of interesting because people don't realize the connection between the 2 o'clock concert every Sunday at the Organ Pavilion in Balboa Park, and during the summer, the 2 o'clock concert at the Spreckels Park in Coronado. And that's because he loved music. Now, Spreckels Park in Coronado's got a very interesting story to it because when he finally started selling the land and developing the city, he set up that park. Everybody wanted to name it after him, and he said, no, it will be called City Park. You will not name it after me. 2 years after he died, they did it. And he's probably rolling over in his grave because he didn't want to have it named after him, because he did what he did because he wanted to, not because he had to. But one of his greatest legacies is right across the street from that park in Coronado, the library there. They call it the Spreckels Reading Room, but it's actually the part of the library that was built out of reinforced concrete at his insistence, still there today, and they do all sorts of special shows there. And again, that is all the stuff that he did and he donated to the folks in San Diego. But probably the thing that most of us use and don't even realize it's connected to Spreckels is, how many of you have gone to Mission Bay and driven the bridge over West Mission Bay Drive? He built that bridge. Back in the days when that was called False Bay and it was a mud flat, it was very difficult to get to the beach. So he decided to extend his railroad line from Old Town to Mission Beach. So he builds that bridge. Great engineering feat. So the bridge now takes the railroad, and the railroad goes right there to Mission Boulevard, Pacific Ocean. But remember, Spreckels said transportation dictates where people go in population. So he needed to build an attraction. And the attraction he built was Belmont Park. So if you ever go to Belmont Park, that is a legacy of Spreckels. Kind of interesting because he literally was just getting completed when Spreckels died. But that's how long that park has been there. And that was all part of Spreckels' vision. Just like he had a tent city there for people to spend their summers living on the beach, similar to what they had in Coronado. And again, that was all his vision. And of course, eventually that light rail line went right up Mission Boulevard into La Jolla, and that's got another interesting part of San Diego history. But he did all of these things to connect everything together. And every now and then, if you go places, you'll see little legacies. If you go up to Mission Cliffs Park at the end of the Park Boulevard, which they now call Trolley Barn Park, go there and you'll see these little memorials, and they're made out of cobblestones. Those are the original cobblestones that were in the path that you would hike when you went through his garden. And there's a little plaque there that'll tell you this is, courtesy of John Spreckels, and this is what he built. So he did all sorts of little things like that. And again, just to be the visionary, who would have thought you start building out of reinforced concrete, and 100 years later, those buildings are still here to this day. And he did all sorts of great stuff like that. The other thing that people don't realize is, especially up in the Salinas, back in his day, the Salinas Valley and Watsonville were just developing as agricultural sites. But you know what the first crops they grew there were? Sugar beets. They wanted to make sure that the sugar business kept growing. So they built up the land and they built sugar refineries up there. And sugar beets were the first crops. Now, of course, it's a great agricultural land and we do other stuff. But again, that was their vision. Got to satisfy that demand for sugar. So it's a really, really interesting little project that they have here. And again, there's all sorts of other little things that Spreckels did when you go around town that you'll notice. But I guess the biggest thing is he was such a big proponent for San Diego that he pretty much funded almost all of the Balboa Park growth in the 1915 Panama Expedition. He did that. And of course, the Oregon Pavilion was left behind that. But here's another little story that goes with the Spreckels family. When the Panama Canal opened in 1915, that's when San Diego suddenly was noticed by the Navy as a base to protect the canal, and we started dredging the bay and filling in North Island. But the other part is the federal government, for the opening of the Panama Canal, put up money. The last city you left the United States to go through the Panama Canal to go to the West Coast was New Orleans. First city you arrived in was San Diego. These two cities were given money to throw an expedition. The only problem is there was so much corruption going on in New Orleans, the federal government pulled the money from New Orleans. Spreckel's brother got the money donated to San Francisco. And if you go up to San Francisco, their Palace of the Fine Arts and all that other stuff was actually built in competition to our Balboa Park for the business for the Panama Expo. That's why if you go to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, you're going to see an organ that looks exactly like the one in San Diego, because his brother Adolf, he and his brother Adolf were 50-50 partners in all the Spreckels family businesses in San Francisco. So they built another organ just like that in San Francisco. But here's the deal. There's a clause that says the one in San Diego always has to have more pipes. 5 years ago, they refurbished the one in San Francisco and added a couple of pipes. So they added 5 more pipes to the one in San Diego, so that the one in San Diego is still bigger to this day. So it's kind of interesting. The tragedy of all of this was Spreckels' son was being trained to take over all the family business. And unfortunately was killed in a car crash in the 1920s. And as a result, nobody took it over. So after Spreckels died, they pretty much started selling off all the Spreckels properties in San Diego, with the exception of the Hotel Del. And the other part of it is Spreckels had another younger brother and sister who didn't have the work ethic that he and Adolf had, and their families became very contentious. This became one of the families that they kept suing each other for money. As a matter of fact, one of their one of his ne'er-do-well nephews stayed in Hawaii and became one of the first surfer bums in the 1950s, and lived in Maui, and couldn't get his trust fund until he was like 22, 23 years old. So he sold dope in Maui until he was able to get his trust fund, and still lived in Sprecklesville surfing. So again, we have all of that legacy. But every now and then, about 3 years ago, they actually had a family reunion for the Spreckels folks at the library in Coronado. So that legacy that he left is still with us. So folks, it's about 25 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I could.
Great, Charlie. That's terrific. Any questions of Charlie?
Charlie, what year was that Mission Bay Bridge built?
The Mission Bay Bridge was built in the late 1910s, early 1920s. It was the original one. I don't have the exact date for that.
So Charlie, did the Spreckels, did he make all his money on the sugar business, or did he expand into other forms of businesses?
Oh, we had lots of other businesses. What happened was his dad took the grocery business all the way up to become the Sugar King, but his dad also had all sorts of other different businesses. His dad was buying and selling. Spreckels made his money, started out on investing in his dad's company in sugar. His love of the sea, he started the shipping company. He was the head of a shipping company that did all the shipping. He also had real estate development companies.
Wow.
And he had several other factories of other operations that he would run, because he would buy things. But people don't realize, if you drink water in San Diego in the South Bay that comes from Lake Morena and the Otay Lakes, he built the dam and created the Coronado Water Company to supply water for Coronado. He built a power company for Coronado and lower downtown San Diego. So he ran the power company, owned that too. He owned the light rail system. He owned the ferry. He owned the railroad and all of that stuff. And he did make quite a bit of money shipping stuff from San Diego to Yuma to get it to the Intercontinental Railroad. So that was all the stuff he did. And like I said, when he did things, sometimes they seem random, but he always thought ahead, and they were all parts of the piece of the puzzle. They all fit together to keep his businesses going.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, Brad.
This is just kind of a comment, and it's kind of geeky, but it's a follow-up on Mission Beach. If you notice, the streets are really narrow. The interesting thing is it was built around the streetcar line. That people are not supposed to take the streetcar to go to their homes there. So if you notice, all the streets in Mission Beach are actually pedestrian walkways.
Correct.
And the alleys are literally alleys. So
yep.
Other than the few streets that go out to the man-made points like Santa Clara, yeah, they're all built around the alleyways and the little pedestrian walkways.
I see Deborah Sharp has a question.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah, quickly. Remind us, what was the population in San Diego at the height of his, existence?
Well, we hit about 25,000. It was about 15,000 when he started. It was getting to be 25, 30,000 by the time he died. We were still relatively small.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Thank you.
Oh.
Everything was small. But getting back to what Brad was talking about Mission Beach, a couple of things about it. If you go to Mission Boulevard, just south of PB Drive on the west side of the street, you'll see number 88. One of the old trolleys that used to run along that line was used as a house. And what was really funny is the housing was short when they were converting from tents to houses in Mission Beach. So people were buying the trolley cars and setting them up as houses. The city zoned it out. So the one that's there now is the last one. So if they remodel it, it can't be a trolley car anymore. So they have to leave it the same. So you can go down and look at it. And the other thing is the reason it's named Mission Beach, as you go down Mission Boulevard, all the cross streets are named after the California missions and beaches from all around the world. So that's why you have El Carmel Point and Monterey Point and all the different beaches. So that's how it all got its name. And again, that was all part of his thing.
And all those streets are in alphabetical order. It's not like
Yes.
the other streets, like, we all know about the ones in Brooklyn where they're named after the authors, but these are like the beaches, but they're not strictly an A street followed by a B street followed by a C, but they are alphabetical.
Yes, they are. The only ones that are totally alphabetical are all the streets in Pacific Beach. We go from east and all the north-south streets, you go Baird, Cass, Dawes, Everts, Fanuel, Gresham, Haynes, Ingram, Jewel, Kendall, Lamont. You see, having worked out there for years, I still remember them all.
I think Dan.
This is
had
what
a question.
happens when you work in the engineering department processing traffic accident reports. You learn all these cute little things.
Dan?
Yeah, have you ever, well, I was invited to come up to see the city photographer one time. This is a long time ago. And he showed me through his closet. And he had a lot of old photos of the city of San Diego that I don't know what he did with them, but some of them were impressive. He had one with the old locomotive going across a bridge, and the bridge had broken. I guess it's doing and this locomotive is halfway into the water, and they're standing around that. But he had a lot of photos like that.
Yeah,
and
they do have. It's kind of interesting because if you go to the San Diego Historical Society in Balboa Park, they do have archives. Every now and then they'll take out a lot of those old pictures and show them. And Alan, I know, just was giving everybody a comment. I mean, I remember when I started on the police department out in PB in 78 on Mission Boulevard, you still had the trolley tracks. And we used to have to do accidents when people would step in them and break their legs and stuff like that. Yeah. So, I mean, that vestige is not that far away. And like I said, Spreckels and his expansion of the trolley also created all sorts of different types of demographic shifts in San Diego, something that it's not enough time to talk about. But if you ever look at populations of the city and how ethnicity, everybody claimed a hill, a lot of that had to do with how the trolley could bring you to and from work. But again, that's another little observation for the future.
So we had a pretty good trolley system before, but it got torn up like LA's trolley system.
Yeah, ours was actually, what made ours kind of work is you got to remember, one of the things about Spreckels, an author who, there's only about 2 or 3 books on him. I learned a lot about Spreckels because Spreckels was also a Mason, and so am I. So there's a lot of stuff about him in Masonic stuff. He did a lot of charity work that he never would take credit for. I'll give you an example. The first hospital in San Diego to treat the indigent for free was Mercy Hospital, and Spreckels funded that. Okay, and never took credit for it. And he also would never pay a bribe. And he would never try to do anything that was corrupt. So the big problem with the LA light rail system that they had was they had different competing companies and who was paying bribes to the city government. That didn't happen. Here in town, Spreckels built these things, and he really was a good man, because this one author, lady here in town, who wrote a book about him. And the one thing she says is she talked to all these people that used to work for him and everything else. She could not find anybody with anything bad to say about him, because of his ability, fear of big social things. He didn't go to a lot of big social events. He spent a lot of time with his children, his family, and he did all of those things. And that's why when he finally gave a public speech at the Hotel Del, he invited everybody, including his critics, and everybody showed up. It was standing room only, because he had never done that before. Yeah. And it was a couple of years before he died. It's kind of funny because I'm still trying to get a copy of the speech. I want to read it, but I haven't gotten it yet. But again, he did all of these things, and we will walk around and we don't realize the legacy of some of the little things he did, and how things that seemed non-connected were really connected. It's just like the Golden West Hotel. Why is it still a single resident occupancy hotel for the pensioners? Because when they were building the railroad from San Diego to Yuma, it took 13 years. The workers need a place to stay, and they couldn't afford to stay at the US Grant Hotel. So he built that hotel with a fixed price that was within the salary of all the workers. And that's how he built the hotel, and it's still pretty much used for similar stuff to this day. And that was his goal. What I love about the Golden West Hotel, it's one of the 3 buildings downtown that's still allowed to have neon lights, and their neon lights were grandfathered in when the city changed the ordinance. So it's really cool to see the neon lights there at night. Same with the Spreckels Theater.
Okay. Well, Charlie, thank you. Thank you very, very much. As fascinating as always. I don't know where you get all this stuff, but it's always interesting. So, Deborah, is that is that a new question, Deborah? I think we might have one time for one more, but
Those are hand claps.
oh, those are hand claps. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, I think again, thank you very much, Charlie. We always appreciate your time and effort, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending the meeting, and I wish everybody happy the rest of the day, and I'll see you at our next meeting. So take care.
I know.
Bye.